a prohibition against prostitution. They don't like prostitution, and if it was happening via the internet, let's figure out how to make it not happen through the internet, because in theory, I suppose it's supposed to mean it doesn't happen at all. I don't think that's a safe assumption, but that may have been what motivated some people. But otherwise, you had people who genuinely wanted to protect sex workers, but annoyed all the evidence that people were trying to provide to say it's not going to have that effect, and now it's causing damage. So the question is, I'm not sure. There's some little bit of me that is slightly optimistic that because it has caused damage that I think some well-meaning people hadn't expected, that could potentially create the political factors where maybe the worst of it could be undone. But that doesn't usually happen. Usually these laws go on the books and then they stay on the books and they stay on the books in their terrible way for ages. There are some possibilities that it may be challenged. There are a couple aspects to SESTA, FOSTA, whichever version you want to label it, that make it vulnerable to challenge. But some of them you can knock out little bits of unconstitutional bits and still be left with the rest. For instance, one unconstitutional bit is that it isn't just what a site intermediates as of now that could potentially be published, but it creates potentially liability for anything it had published in the past. And that starts to look, I believe the term is ex post facto. The Constitution says you can't make up a law to go back and punish something that already happened. You had to already have the law on the books for there to have been liability. So that little part is very ripe for challenge, and somebody may challenge it. I think the more interesting question is, whether it could be challenged on a First Amendment basis. About this has obviously had a real chilling effect on speech, and usually when you affect speech, particularly on a content basis, you have to have a very narrowly tailored solution that can survive strict scrutiny, and I don't think this can. The fact that it has wiped out so much perfectly legitimate, lawful content, I think impugns this regulation as being constitutional on its face. And then there's a couple of other issues that people are kicking around, but the logistics of challenging a bill is tricky. Like, you need the right plaintiff. Ideally, you need the right plaintiff that the optics are good, because especially for the sites that were intermediating some of the more adult content, not everybody is a fan of that. And even though it may be perfectly lawful under the First Amendment, judges and juries can be tempted not to see it in terms of its lawful principle. They can just be tempted to see it as, ugh, I don't like it, therefore it should go away. So the logistics of challenging a lawsuit are also difficult. But there's also the potential harm. I mean, I think there's a body count, and I don't mean to be flippant around it, but there are definitely measurable consequences to the physical safety of a number of women as a result of this law. There is a growing list of websites that have taken down content, taken down either entire sections of content or spot censored other content. And that list is going to grow, and that list might ultimately impress somebody that there's a political need to do something. And there's also going to be an economic effect where I think Congress, and this gets back to your Facebook point, kill Facebook, kill Facebook, kill Facebook. What happens if you do? Consider how many people these companies employ, the enormous contribution they have to the economic engine of the company, of the country. At a certain point, they're going to kill this entire industry. And I don't think that's exaggerating. I mean, some of the larger companies will be able to pivot and endure, but then instead of having an open internet where we have the ability for anybody to all of a sudden go from garage to billionaire via IPO to we got what we got, and that's who we're stuck with, because they're the only people who can capitalize themselves through all the regulatory morass that has now been inflicted on them.
Well, when you start, as you noted, when you have a body count, an economic body count, a literal body count, but when you can kind of have all of these things coming together, usually you can see some legislative change that people will dial it back. If it's not there, it's the courts. But doesn't some of these concerns, the misguided misconstrued intentions or misdirected intentions, or legitimate, I have a political agenda, I'm going to push it, some of that gets reflected in the broader tech policy approaches. I mean, when you go and look at Senator Cruz's line of questioning to Mark during the Facebook hearings, where getting back to that content neutral, that don't, to enjoy the protections of Section 230, Senator Cruz was essentially saying that the Facebook had to be content neutral in order to be protected, which just isn't accurate. So how do you bridge some of that gap and have those conversations that, or get the word out that this is not the case, that you don't understand the basic either technology, the platform? I mean, it seems to me that's probably the greatest challenge you face as one who's fighting these battles in the court.
Yeah, I mean, it's always problematic when Congress regulates or attempts to regulate something it doesn't understand. It's never going to be good if you try to regulate something you don't understand. I don't know if you've heard of the law of fences. This was something that, it's not original to John F. Kennedy, but he quoted it. That basically, in paraphrase, if you come across a field and you see a fence, don't take down the fence until you know why it's there, because you might not see the lion in the weeds waiting to pounce on you. But if you take down the fence and the lion gets to sneak up on you, that, know why we've done things before you start messing them up. And Congress did not understand, and they tore down the fence that was Section 230. So that's always ill-advised. And one of the things that the Facebook hearings revealed is how selective the clued-inness was among Congress, that the number of people who really understood the issues that they were asking questions about was appallingly small. So there are certain efforts for, well, what can you do structurally to better inform Congress? And one of the things that's getting proposed, and I'm going to have to fudge what I think it's being called, but there used to be something called like the Office of Technological Assessment. I'm mushing that, but there used to be an Office of Technology Experts that was built into Congress to advise Congress so that they could have some built-in expertise. And there are proposals to bring that back, and that would be an excellent idea. Politically, Silicon Valley's been somewhat criticized for being really slow to be in DC, that on certain other policy issues, other incumbent businesses had boots on the ground and good infrastructure to be able to speak in the way that special interests like to speak to Congress, and they were able to sort of co-opt policy much more effectively because Silicon Valley wasn't there. And some of it wasn't there because there were smaller companies, they were less capitalized, and they live in California where DC is very far away, and it didn't really dawn on these companies that a business critical function was going to be having FaceTime in DC to make sure that the regulation that affected them was not going to go off the rails. So there's increasing efforts by the tech industry to push for the policy it desperately needs to survive. And otherwise, I think, some of this is, can we inform the citizenry a little bit better? Like I said before, people are scared. They don't really understand what's happening, but it feels bad. And so therefore people are like looking to, authority figures to go deal with things that are happening that are bad and just trusting them to do it right. And I think we need to help inform normal people what is at stake with various regulatory questions so that they can lobby their own congresspeople to vote in ways that are healthier to preserving the things that are actually important to them, and they wouldn't purposely be asking to have taken away from them, like free speech on the internet.
Well, one of the things, too, is you've seen, we've had different technology experts come in and offer guidance, as you noted, and kind of filling in that, understanding what roles people are playing. I mean, I saw a comment online saying, well, if only we had the subject matter experts question the other subject matter experts rather than the members of Congress themselves doing the questioning. And I thought, well, you've got to have one voice, and haven't they just prepped better? But that does bear in mind, or bear the question, how do you provide that expertise?
Well, they did have some, even in SESTA, even in the FOSTA hearings, for instance, they had law professors testifying. What was sort of especially unfortunate about this process is I think legislation tends to be better when it follows extensive hearings where they can create a record and have a record that is going to be evidence-based for whatever policy results. And they were on their way to doing that. In fact, some of the pushback, I think, by Professor Eric Goldman, there's a knowledge standard floating around in SESTA and FOSTA. It was in SESTA, it wasn't in FOSTA, but then eventually it ended up in FOSTA. There's this knowledge requirement, which is one of the things that makes the change so dangerous for platforms. Without getting into the weeds of that, there's this knowledge thing, it's a problem. And he had pointed this out in the hearings, that there's this knowledge thing and it's in the language and it's a problem, and they actually took him seriously. And so in one of the drafts of a red line of the bill, it came out based on this feedback.
Well, and I was going to say, so we're going to have to tease this, jump to a commercial break, and then find out what happens when your joke becomes reality.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
And welcome back to Buzz Off with Lawyer Liz on America's Web Radio. I'm your host, Lawyer Liz, chatting today on the 6 lies and red tape that results from, let's just say, not necessarily shoddy, but perhaps good-intended, good-natured, but when regulators try to regulate platforms, they can often miss the mark. And so we're chatting today with legal expert Kathy Kellis. And Kathy, you were teasing us right before the break. What happens when my notes in jest actually make it into the legislation or the policy decisions?
Well, so I started to tell you about, so Professor Goldman pushed back on this onerous aspect of FOSTA, and it came out, and then that expression about never watch how laws and sausage get made, the sausage got made, and somehow it ended up back in it, and we ended up with the FOSTA-SESTA monster bill that had the worst of everything, and it came together to be the bill that went into law. So I want to say there was a happy ending because, we followed best practices for how to, create regulation in a sensible, prudent manner, but unfortunately that isn't quite what actually happened there. But in terms of a recommendation, having the right experts, having the hearings, have as many hearings as you need, get all the people, get all the stakeholders, and create a record, because, it also looked good in litigation if Congress has to defend this in some point where, if it's subject to challenge, that it shows that, again, strict scrutiny, they had to kind of know what they were doing, and they don't look like they knew what they were doing. And, that will actually potentially make a challenge easier, because they can't say that this was a carefully tailored solution to a regulatory challenge, since there's a lot of evidence to say they weren't careful at all.
Well, it makes me think of Ghostbusters, where, they're told, think of the form of the enforcer, or the god. And of course, next thing we know, Stay Puft Marshmallow Man is destroying New York City. And it was like, well, I tried to think of the most, happy, innocuous, like the harmless thing I could. And yet it still manages to tear apart the city until our intrepid Ghostbusters fight back. So perhaps an apt analogy, or perhaps I've just been watching too many 80s flicks.
I already cited Voltron in this conversation, so I think we're thematically relevant here.
Yeah. I like it. So where is some of this coming? I mean, it seems that a lot of this, we talk about it being good-natured or good-intended. I mean, who doesn't want to end sex trafficking? The fact that it also stripped down legitimate or perhaps less, lascivious or other things, and it had the unintended consequences. I mean, when you look at kind of even the Facebook hearings where Facebook is evil, it's doing all these things, it's selling all this data, but that really wasn't new, or it shouldn't have been as much of a surprise as apparently it is and it was. How do you see that changing, or how do you see that changing?
I want to believe that, with information, fear is defeated by information. If we can get information to people, that will help. But that's a really big underpinning to some of the regulatory challenges that we're having right now, but it isn't the be all end all. There's also self-interest, and there's different conflicting interests that also use regulatory challenges as opportunities to advance their own private interests, and even if they're not necessarily the best ones across the board. And it's possible to convince people that that is what they want. The reality with Sesta Fosta, so, okay, you said, well, who doesn't want to help? I think the question of who doesn't want to help sex trafficking victims is one where you could say, of course, everybody wants to help them. But in terms of let's measure the harm that's resulted from this bill, then I think things get a little unclear. There's been a tremendous amount of censorship harm to general speech interests. That should be something everybody cares about, but if you called up a lot of people and said, it depends how you frame it. Do you care that you have free speech online? Not everybody is necessarily a fan. Maybe they should be, but maybe they just don't realize how it really matters to their lives. They're kind of like, people keep saying things I don't like, so let's censor them. That sounds good. Even in America, people, flag-waving people aren't always a fan of all the constitutional tenets that inform our democracy, because they're often used to protect the unpopular, and people tend to vote for what is popular. So there's also conflicts there, because then if you go back and you look at the other form of harm that's come from Sesta Fosta, is it has hurt sex workers directly, physically, and I think there are some people who, not that they want to see them hurt, but if you said that the policy challenge is to make sure that they can have them and they can conduct the work they're going to do in a safe way, there's a lot of people who would say, forget that. I don't want it to exist at all. And I don't want to support anything that would potentially help this activity that I think should be completely illegal and not happen. So these can be really complicated regulatory challenges. That's Sesta Fosta. But you can extend that logic to any other challenge where you look at Facebook. People are upset with what happened with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica largely because of what the effect appeared to be on things they cared about. That is driving a lot of political interest in doing whatever would stop it, even though maybe similar things had happened previously where other presidential campaigns might have shared data and acquired it from social media or used social media effectively. And if that was the guy you were rooting for, then maybe the optics don't look like this is a problem that we need to fix. So these are complicated questions in terms of, as people don't really know exactly how much these principles may matter to their lives, then you end up playing sort of a lot of political favoritism, and it's difficult to get a coherent policy conversation from people who care but don't entirely know why they should care or what they should care about. So, on my to-do list, and that's why I do podcasts, is, to help teach people and explain to people and say that, what we're talking about may help speech you don't like. It may help a person you don't like. It might help a politician you don't like. But that a lot of these principles are principles that are on the books and exist because someday they're going to be what you need to. And I think that's an important message to convey to people, and then explain both in terms of the technology and in terms of the regulation what that means and how that should guide our choices.
And it seems too that you have to kind of as you said, put aside the fear. Just because you don't like the outcome, perhaps doesn't mean that the platform is wrong. And one of the other ways it seems we've seen state and local governments jump in the mix is when you start looking at some of the other disruptive platforms saying, well, we don't like the outcome, and that these are platforms that are permitting, for example, Airbnb to increase traffic in our area because there's more tourists coming in, more vacationers, or we're not getting the same hotel motel tax revenue that perhaps we would receive if they were going through a more formal process, or even Uber and Lyft and some of these other disruptive platforms. But not understanding the platform or not understanding the harm or just going straight after that
there's a lot of levels of things that are going on. I mean, with Airbnb, one of the challenges is that local jurisdictions are varying in their enthusiasm for how much they like these services. Some of the places, like out here in the San Francisco Bay Area, where the housing market is ridiculously tight, they sort of look at Airbnb and the short-term rentals as being something that is making it potentially tighter. There's some question of whether this is true. There are some upsides to having these services, which is, to some respect, people can only afford their rent if they can do short-term rentals when they're on vacation, because it makes up the difference. Meanwhile, other jurisdictions entirely are fans of it. There's certain communities who are like, this is helping us have a tourist industry at all because we don't have hotels, and this is great, and everybody makes some money, and we can handle this overflow demand. The problem when you start having local jurisdictions attempt to target the platforms for their speech intermediating behavior, hey, I have an apartment to rent, would you like one? That's speech intermediating. The problem when local jurisdictions get to go after it is they're putting pressure on the platform, and if they're able to put the pressure on the platform, they'll force the platform to either not exist or change the shape of its services in a way that might appeal to that jurisdiction, but it's now decided it for everybody. And so one of the things that's built into Section 230, and this hasn't changed with it hasn't exactly changed with SESTA FOSTA, is a preemption clause that basically says you can't do anything high local jurisdiction. You can't do something that changes the protection the platform would have happened we basically want to defer to federal policy, because this is something where there are just way too many jurisdictions that would have way too many sets of rules, and it would cripple a platform if they had to figure out how to comply with all of them. So that's why we have some preemption to say, no, we're going to turn to Congress. This is interstate commerce. Let Congress figure out what the appropriate policy would be. That's part of the answer to what you were saying. And that's an important point. The internet crosses borders, and that's a reality of the technology. And it's something... This is hard. We have never lived in a world where billions of people could immediately talk to each other. That is a very challenging moment for the human race to figure out how to handle. We are figuring it out. There are some growing pains. We can get through the growing pains, because while on the one hand it's somewhat terrifying, this is also one of the most exciting moments in human history that all of a sudden this is available. And I think we want to be careful that we regulate in a way that lets us have all the promise of this new technology, minimize the downsides, but by all means, don't minimize the upsides too. And I think that's the thing we have to be really careful as we start to make our policy choices, that we, just because it lays a normal egg every so often doesn't mean we should kill the golden goose.
So what can people do to stay engaged and track these issues?
So what can people do?
General media literacy and keeping up with the news, and some sources are more authoritative than others. I, for instance, write at a tech news site called TechDirt, TechDirt.com. Ars Technica is very good. The EFF is an organization that tracks these issues and does advocacy around them. It's worth subscribing to their newsletter, checking out their Twitter feed, following their blog, because they have their ear on the ground keeping track of these things. it's also worth, general technology literacy yourself is also important. Some of these machines are increasingly mysterious, and, not being afraid to really understand how to drive the devices in your life, that's a good thing to do. And it's daunting. I know that everybody sort of reaches a fatigue point. But that's also something to drive through, because it also means that you actually have some experience. And again, that can help inform, the policy choices that you would like to make.
Well, thank you, Kathy, for sharing your time and insights. And so I encourage everyone to follow Kathy on Twitter.
Well, thank you, Kathy, for sharing your time and insights. And so I encourage everyone to follow Kathy on Twitter and her writings as well. And fortunately, apologies to Rob Graham. We ran out of time for him to share his insights on entertainment and politics. But thank you to America's Web Radio. I'm your host, Lawyer Liz. Catch us next time on Buzz Off with Lawyer Liz on America's Web Radio.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Good morning. Welcome to Medicine on Call. Today I have a really important and a special guest that I'm honored to have on. It's Mr. Patrick Wood. He's the editor of Technocracy News and an author of 2 books that I think people really need to read. The Technocracy Rising, The Trojan Horse of Global Transformation, which was released in 2015, and Trilaterals Over Washington, Volumes 1 and 2. He's a leading expert on sustainable development, green economy, Agenda 21 and 2030, and the expert on the movement of our society towards technocracy. And I'm going to give him the floor in a minute. I want him to explain what technocracy is, but I want everybody to really start thinking outside of the box. We talk a lot on the show about the direction of our healthcare system, and I've tried to flesh out as much as possible how we got to this point. But there's not a lot of talk yet about where we're going and the platforms that are driving us towards our new healthcare delivery model. Everything's about social promotion and social, I should say, trying to inoculate us into thinking that the centralization is good, that we can't make up our own minds by ourselves, that somebody else knows what's best for us. But nobody ever talks about who those people are and what their agenda is. And that's what our show is going to talk about today. I believe knowledge is power, and you're going to have to take off your conventional thinking hats and really start opening up to a new world. So, Mr.
AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Good morning and welcome to the Business Hour. I'm Ron Camacho, your host. And today the business at hand is the business of a very, very millenniums-old libation that has regional origins all over the globe. I'm pleased to be able to profile an organization that has dedicated itself not just to educating the public about the art and the science of winemaking, but also to the tasting of great wines from around the world. They're an organization that has structured itself to help people learn about wine, but also about food and wine in combination, and even to learn about cooking, but perhaps most importantly to be smart consumers of superior wines and great food. And to tell us about the aptly named Vino Venue, a venue located here in Dunwoody, Georgia, a northern suburb of Atlanta, is Rob Van Leer, a partner and the beverage director for Vino Venue. So welcome to the Business Hour, Rob.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
You know, Rob, I just set it up with talking about a millennium's old libation, and not a lot of people know that. They might think of wine going back a few hundred years, or maybe in a couple thousand years, but not many thousands of years. And it goes back many thousands of years. And I would imagine now and then that comes up. One of the seminars when you're focusing on Italian wine or another regional wine, the person that's offering information about the wine might even touch upon some of the history of the wine. But we're going to go to the origins of the Vino Venue organization itself. So tell us a little bit about when the business opened its doors, and also tell us from day one, was there the intent of becoming somewhat of a balance between food and wine, and what was that original setup? Did that model differ from today's model, or have you carried on from the early model to today?
Well, Atlanta Wine School was founded in 2003 by Michael Bryan and his wife Lilia, and it was a wine school that rented space in a number of different areas in Atlanta to teach people about wine and food. And they existed for about 4 years, and then found a somewhat permanent home up in Roswell off of Holcomb Bridge Road called the Wine Room. And that's where I got to know Michael. I met Michael in 2008. I was a student in his CSW, Certified Specialist of Wine class. And so we founded a tasting group together. And so we would talk about business concept. We introduced him to some other people. And Michael's a smart guy, and he kept thinking about different ways to expand the business. And he envisioned a space where you could buy wine and food, take wine classes, do all sorts of stuff. So it evolved from a simpler it evolved from a simpler business where you'd show up for a couple hours, learn about wine, and leave to someplace you come early, stay late, buy wine, have dinner, the whole shebang. So
initially, Atlanta Wine School was very, very wine focused.
Yes.
And it wasn't until I guess you created the retail space in Dunwoody that you were able to really expand the food offering, because today it's a great restaurant setup. I have gone there and had some great meals, some great appetizers, some food and wine pairing events, and really I feel that if you're not going to approach the art and science of winemaking and how that results in different varieties of wine, you can, by osmosis, just show up at Vino Venue and learn about different wines so that you can't help but have an educated palate. Now, early on, wife Lilia was instrumental in working with Michael Bryan.
Lilia was a passionate wine drinker for a while before they met, and so she introduced Michael to the love of wine. And so she was really his inspiration on starting the business. And so she's been involved since day one with it. It's a hugely important part of the business.
We want to give a tip of the hat to her because really she was instrumental in the concept and in the execution of the concept, and so thankfully she helped get the business off the ground. And we miss Michael, who passed away a couple of years ago. He was a great guy as well as a insightful business person, along with Lilia. Now, we've kind of touched on it being a retail business that offers wine and food. It's a wine shop. You offer wine seminars, cooking classes, frequent specials on wine, and meals or appetizer sessions with a winemaker, a focus on a particular varietal. You have a membership program we'll have you tell us about that entitles members to discounts and other specials. And you offer travel even to various wine regions. So that's a lot to digest there. So we're going to break that down. And I want to start with how you, let's say we're not in an elevator, so this is not your elevator speech. We're at a cocktail party, and I seem like I'm interested enough to listen.
You look interesting.
Yeah. I seem interested enough to listen for more than 60 seconds. How is it that you describe when someone says, "Oh, Vino Venue, I have heard about you, and of course I know by the name that you're a wine-centric organization." What do you then, when they say, what else do you do? How do you describe?
Well, I'd say we're a multifaceted wine business. We're a wine restaurant, wine bar, we're wine retail, wine education, cooking education, corporate events. We have enigmatic wine dispensing system. We do wine travel, wine consulting, wedding receptions, anniversary parties, girls' nights out. There's a million different reasons to come here.
Actually, you just touched on one thing that I think is worth mentioning. You can go in and you regularly change the combination of wines that in different price categories. With your prepaid card, you can taste as much of one wine as you'd like, or try a variety at different price points of wines from a dispensary system that was pretty unique, I think, when you introduced it here in Atlanta.
There are not a whole lot of places. Yeah, it allows us to do different wines, different price points, different styles. So if you want to have a Napa Cab for $50 a glass or $10 an ounce, you can do that. If you want to have a more modestly priced, food-friendly wine for $2 an ounce, you can do that. We try to mix them up and try to really, we have some I call geeky wines, some wines you haven't heard of, and some familiar wines too. So it allows us, between that and our Wines by the Glass program, to have over 50 wines by the glass. So whether you want to spend $8 a glass or $50 a glass, anywhere in between, we got you. Plus we have a Wine by the Bottle program, plus we have wine flights and an excellent beer list. So if you're thirsty, we got you.
Well, and you know, a lot of folks don't want a large pour of any given wine, particularly when they're wanting to try 2 or 3 or more wines in the course of an evening or day. And the dispensary system is ideal for getting that. Now, what's the smallest pour that you can get?
Do 1 ounce.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can get 1 ounce of a what might be a $50 glass in the restaurant in a restaurant, and that's the ideal way to see what a $50 glass of wine is all about.
What does your money get you? It's fun. You have natural pairings where you look at, I want to try some Cabernets. So here's 3 next to each other. I want to try a Super Tuscan versus a Barolo versus Brunello. Oh, there's some Pinot Noirs from different areas of the world. Oh, what's that grape? And so I don't know that. And so it really lets you play around and have fun with it. People go crazy about the system.
Let's have you also start off the here early in the program by describing, you're a partner and you're the beverage director. Tell us about the beverage director role.
Sure. So beverage director, if it has liquid, I'm in charge of it. So I'm the person who sources it, buys it, displays it, promotes it, inventories it. I do exciting stuff like put the wine away too. I create labels for things. I create wine lists. I'm a salesman. And then on the other hand, I do a lot of admin. I do payroll, do inventory. I do a lot of reconciliation between dollars going to different parts of our business, because we have like a case of wine can come in. We pay for a case of wine, and where it goes out, we have to control the dollars to match them to the revenue sources. It's easy and complex at the same time.
Yeah, there's a real business side to this otherwise good time emporium. And so in terms of selection of the wines, you know, and there are perhaps more wines that have come through your venue than I dare say some of the largest of wine retailers, just by virtue of those little known wineries that you tap into and you get a small quantity, and that on an ongoing basis you're constantly tapping into this broad range of domestic and wines from all over the world. Tell us a little bit about who does. If it's not exclusively you, do you have a team of people? Does Lilia help you at all with wine selection? Talk about the wine purchasing.
I do all the wine purchasing. However, our director of education, Lizette, will ask me to get certain wines, whether it's certain producers or certain styles of wine. We're doing a Greek wine class. We need 3 Muscateleros to compare from different areas of Greece, and so then I'll go get that. But she'll give me some ideas. The wine instructors, we're constantly doing new wine programs, so they'll reach out to me to say, we need some Chardonnays from these different areas. So they'll give me some guidance on what to do. Then I go find it.
So it really is a collaborative approach.
Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to run.
So one little note about our wine selections: we have about 250 SKUs at any one time, which is not a lot. We have so many other things going on in our business that there's not space for more. And so the beauty there is there's a lot of wines out there, and there's a lot of wines that are kind of boring. So it's up to me to find the wines that deliver great price and value. So if you go to I call the big box fluorescent stores, and you're faced with an aisle where there's 300 Chardonnays, what do? It's mind-boggling. And so with me, we have about a dozen Chardonnays, but I taste Chardonnays all the time. I want to find the best dozen at different price points, different styles. So I do the work for you versus struggling to see which wine label has a cute critter on it.
Which we should emphasize. You're going to have an experience that exposes you to what could be characterized as quality wines, and let the big box fluorescence stores carry the more pedestrian wines, and I think that's an important thing to emphasize. But
I have to also add, our prices are highly competitive with these big box fluorescent stores. So you come in, it's a much sexier environment, personal service, great wine selection, and you'll be amazed how competitive our prices are.
And we'll talk a little bit about that and value in general. We're here with Rob Van Leer, the beverage director and a partner with Vino Venue. We'll be back to talk more about Vino Venue right after this break.
Perhaps you are struggling to cope with the disease of addiction. If not, you probably know a family member or friend that needs help in battling the cravings and the personal and professional damage done by the effects of drugs or alcohol. Get a pen and paper and be ready to write down the following. These are the issues that the trained staff at the Atlanta Healing Center address and treat every day. Their doctors and counselors with over 40 years of practice in the field of addiction can treat the suffering individual in a thoughtful, compassionate, and experienced manner and guide him or her along the path to recovery. So call 770-696-9862 and speak to a knowledgeable staff member about how you or your loved one can be helped to enjoy a better and healthier life. More information is also available on the website at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
This is Lawyer Liz. Join me each week as we discuss drones, the Internet of Things, and all the technology in between. It's Buzz Off with Lawyer Liz, Wednesdays at 2.
Perhaps you are struggling to cope with the disease of addiction. If not, you probably know a family member or friend that needs help in battling the cravings and the personal and professional damage done by the effects of drugs or alcohol. Get a pen and paper and be ready to write down the following. These are the issues that the trained staff at the Atlanta Healing Center address and treat every day. Their doctors and counselors with over 40 years of practice in the field of addiction can treat the suffering individual in a thoughtful, compassionate, and experienced manner and guide him or her along the path to recovery. So call 770-696-9862 and speak to a knowledgeable staff member about how you or your loved one can be helped to enjoy a better and healthier life. More information is also available on the website at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back to the Business Hour. We're here with Rob Van Leer, the beverage director and a partner with Vino Venue that's located in Dunwoody, Georgia, a northern suburb of the metro Atlanta area. And we've been talking about the range of food and wine products and services that you can derive as a customer. And you were describing your role as beverage director, and we were talking about wines, which essentially you do I think, a good job of filtering. You know, as someone who's been a customer, I think we won't name any names, but you're going to avoid a lot of not necessarily quality wines, because you've done a good job to screen for wines which are at least interesting and at most delectable. And we were talking about having access to small wineries that a big box retailer might not even carry. Off the air we were chatting, and you can get good wines from a Kroger or a Publix supermarket or the other beverage-focused retailers. But some of them are going to overlook small family wineries here domestically and abroad that really produce great products. How do you get exposed to those, Rob? And how do they end up at Vino Venue?
Well, I meet people in my travels, and the good news is that Atlanta is becoming more of a wine market, so these wines are coming here. And so Vino Venue is one of the forces supporting these small family-owned wineries. It's easier for us to buy these in the big box places because we have lower volume, so we don't need to do a 500 case drop. We don't need to commit to these things. We can buy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cases and sell them, and hopefully we'll keep selling. If not, we'll find somebody else to do. Whereas a bigger place, they need a more consistent stream of wine, so they're a little less nimble than are we.
Let's go down that path, so to speak, a bit. You mentioned wine travel, and I would imagine someone whose title is a beverage director. And this might also be true for Lizette, if you're out there. You probably have traveled a bit just to keep yourself educated about what's out there in various wine regions of the world. But let's say you're in the south of France and just traveling around Burgundy. You're traveling down the road, and you just on a whim turn where you see a sign that says there's the Lafite winery, family owned and operated, and you're just checking things out as you cruise down the road.
Sure, I do that. It's sometimes not that spontaneous. Sometimes I do some research in advance and really know where to go and have appointments. If I want to see the main guy or gal, it's nice that they know I'm coming. So the spontaneity happens more when I'm traveling with my wife. Then it's more, hey, we have the afternoon. Let's go check these out. When I'm traveling more seriously, it's a little more laid out in advance. I went last year. The San Lucia Highlands Wine Artisans sponsored me to go on a trip to San Lucia Highlands in Monterey County, so I spent a delightful 4 days there. Bonfi Vintners from Italy is sponsoring me to go in late summer for a 13-day trip through Italy to tour most of Italy's wine regions. That's going to be a blast. So I will have a little flexibility, but sometimes I'm going to go where they want me to on those trips.
Actually, I'm thinking about Texas wine, because we had Kim McPherson of McPherson Wines. Have you had any Texas wines at Vino Venue?
We're not carrying one right now, but we were carrying Locations TX, which is my favorite of the Locations wines. It's a GSM blend from the Texas High Plains appellation, which is kind of near Amarillo in the Panhandle State. Delicious wines.
What about other wine? People obviously know that there are wine regions throughout Italy and throughout France, and you've got Argentina and Chile and Australia and other parts of the world. But domestically, for a moment, we'll focus. Are there little-known wine regions or lesser-known wine regions that you get wines from other than California, Oregon, and Washington?
Yeah, we carry wines from New York State, from North Carolina, we've carried wines from Texas, from Idaho, from New Mexico, from Arizona, from Georgia. Having said all that, the West Coast still is the dominant driver. It's one nice thing with Vino Venue is, well, with all our sampling, we can put an ounce or two in people's mouths and let them know. They might not want to commit to a bottle of Texas wine or New York wine, but if you give them an ounce or two of wine, suddenly they're like, wow, especially if you get to them with their proper food. You do some smoked brisket with this Locations Texas, and they're like, this is pretty good. I'm gonna buy a bottle. That's the whole deal. Get some wine and food in their mouth, the proper pairing, explain how it works, and suddenly people start smiling and go, this is great. Please give me a case.
You know, we're going to get to food wine pairing in a bit, but I want to travel down the path of your personal travels. What are some of the regions that you've visited? I mentioned Italy and France, and I would imagine you've spent a good deal of time in those two countries.
I've spent a good deal of time in Italy. I've spent some time in France. The time I've spent in France has really been more of a tourist. Certainly drinking a lot of wine, but in terms of serious visits, that is on my wish list. My wife is saying next year has to be the year to do a serious wine trip to France, but I'm looking forward to that.
And how about South America and Australia?
I haven't got Australia. That's a poke. No, I haven't been to either one of those. Either Australia or South America. We sell a lot of their wines though.
On the list.
On the list, yeah.
Short list.
France is number one right now. My wife, at least once a month, reminds me of that.
Yeah, you could spend a lifetime exploring, it seems, the French and Italian wine-growing regions and wineries. And, I have spent a little bit of time in those two parts of the world. And talk about food and wine pairing, I think those would be two regions which have cultivated a classic set of food and wine pairings over the centuries. Even you can, in California, you've got a great food growing region and great wineries, so they have focused on food and wine pairings over the last century, say. But in Italy and France, it's gone on for centuries, which brings us to some of the seminars. You have seminars in Vino Venue, where you might talk about Brunellos to Burgundies, or you could focus on any one varietal, but talk about in general what Lisette, I would imagine, oversees in the way of your seminars.
So Lisette will get together with our wine instructors and me, and we'll talk about what we want to do next. And I have to emphasize, Lisette is the driver of this. She comes up with ideas, we come up with ideas. We're blessed with our wine instructors are all very well traveled, so they will go to the regions and come back all excited about, hey, I just got back from Portugal, let's do a Douro seminar. So it's driven from them and Lisette. We're always looking for ideas. How do we put a new spin on these wines? How do we get people excited about it? So all the time we're developing new classes.
You've had themes like Valentine's. You have Valentine's Day specials, or Bastille Day, the Pumpkin Fest. Tell us a little about those kinds of programs.
We want to get people in the restaurant eating some food and drinking some wine. So if we can show them, and Valentine's Day is obvious with the romance, and what's more romantic than wine, but Bastille Day celebrating the French, Pumpkin Day seasonal food. It's just a matter of getting people in the restaurant, trying some food, trying some wine pairings, and realizing how well they work together. And this is also our executive chef, Patrick Good, is instrumental on coming up with ideas too. So it's always what's seasonal, what's working well right now, what wine or what beer will go with it. It's continual.
Right, and you mentioned beer. We should say that actually Vino Venue has allowed some beer in the house, and that
we love beer.
Yeah, and beer and food pairings is also something that people have become increasingly aware of what beers might work better with what foods, or at least learning to explore. And that is one of the things about Vino Venue, is that you're broadening people's palates by specifically educating them maybe in classic pairings, but also introducing to them to some new kinds of combinations. But really it's helping people understand that there's a world of wine and beer to explore, pairing with various foods. And so you've got the restaurant side, and you even have cooking classes. Is that right?
We do. We do between wine classes and cooking classes over 200 a year. And those are public classes alone. We do a lot of private classes too. So if you want to have a group team building exercise from your office, you want to celebrate your birthday, we'll do a private cooking class for you. I mean, it is astounding. I bet, I don't know, we do, but
it's for a week.
Oh yeah, it's more than that. I mean, and private classes and corporate stuff. I mean, we have a double demonstration, $100,000 double demonstration kitchen in the back of our building with full audiovisual microphone. You can play your own music there. And we have a whole talented roster of chefs. We will create wine dinners. We have sommeliers talk about the wines. You can have your own private world in there. You can give speeches. You can do whatever you want to, and we can do some great wine and food pairings, or we can have you cook and you eat what you cooked.
You can help someone create a totally unique corporate event focused around a particular wine or varietal or country or whatever.
How fancy they want to be. You give us notice, we'll bring whatever you want into it. So some people come and spend the moon, other people want to spend a modest amount of money. It's wonderful that way.
Do you have sessions that are focused on strictly one country, like an Argentinian or Chilean or French or Italian evenings?
All the time. All the time. I mean, I'm just looking. I took a quick look at our calendar for the next 10 days. I'll read you a few things we're doing. In the next 10 days, we're doing a Under the Tuscan Sun cooking class.
Let me interrupt you there, because I want to talk about this list of current and upcoming events, but we're going to be taking a break. And, we've been talking about the range of exposure to wine and food that you can get at Vino Venue, and you're going to underscore that by sharing with us some of the events that are coming up. We're here with Rob Van Leer of Vino Venue, and we're going to talk more about what you can experience at Vino Venue right after this break.
45 years of experience is behind the most trusted name in auto transportation. Passport Transport, the first and finest today. That's why Passport Transport is the preferred auto transport for major auto manufacturers, concours, museums, tours, and collectors, and should be your choice from across the state to across the country. When you have the need, go to PassportTransport.com and enjoy the peace of mind referenced experience will give you. Passport Transport.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mike Karuchak. Have you ever wondered what doctors talk about amongst themselves? If you do, join us on the Doctor's Lounge and hear the doctors' conversations amongst themselves. Join me and my co-host, Dr. Hal Schertz, every Thursday morning, 8 to 9 a.m.
Cook Immigration Partners is your passport through the immigration maze. Whether it's help with E-Verify in your business, or help in how to document a new employee under the new I-9 rules, or if you marry a foreign national, Cook Immigration Partners is your best choice for a legal advocate. Call us today at 866-286-6200. That's 866-286-6200, or visit us on the web at www.immigration.net.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back to the Business Hour. I'm Ron Camacho, your host, and today we have Rob Van Leer of Vino Venue. He's a partner and the beverage director for Vino Venue, and we've been talking about the range of offerings from Vino Venue, which are really quite broad, and he's going to give you a taste of just the next couple of weeks of activities at Vino Venue, and if you can imagine, go to www, so you don't have to imagine, www.vinovenue.com, and look at the calendar. And I'll be willing to bet if you have just an inkling of an interest in food, wine, or beer, you're going to find something that you want to go and check out. And we'll get into this in a bit. That goes for someone who might be flying to the country from abroad, someone flying to the southeast from another part of the country, someone driving from a great distance away. As Rob had pointed out to me off the air, there are people who have to think about, should we fly or should we drive, that are fans of Vino Venue. So look at the calendar, and I'm sure you're going to probably find something that you'll want to experience on premises at Vino Venue. So, Rob, go through some of those some of those scheduled events over the next couple of weeks.
So this is just the next 10 days. We're doing a Tuscan cooking class. We're doing a rosé tasting. We're doing a Battle of the Pinot Noirs wine class where you're exploring Pinot Noirs around the world and why they taste the way they taste. We're doing a Zuccardi paired experience, which is one of Argentina's premier wineries. Paired experience is one of their experts. We're doing a taco bar cooking class. We're doing Cork and Pork, the Cinco de Porco edition, which is a pork and food festival beer with a Latino flavor. And we're doing Judgment of Paris. We're recreating a Judgment of Paris, the famous 1976 tasting in Paris between Bordeaux, Burgundy, and California. That's the next 10 days. And you can look at any 10 days. It's amazing.
That's a list that a retailer of wine might have set up for the year.
For the year.
And we're talking about 10 days.
And it's just the next 10 days.
Yeah, that's why I've characterized you as the premier source for learning and tasting, certainly in the Southeast, and one of the, I can't imagine too many places around the country that outdo you in terms of that range of sessions that you offer. Let's talk about food and wine pairing. From port and pork, truffles, and before we actually go down this path, you had mentioned that you have one of the sessions dedicated to rosé. Tell me the Rob Van Leer perspective on why we've experienced. I have my own thoughts, a resurgence in popularity of rosés. There are some really good rosés out there, always have been, but they fell into kind of obscurity almost. And more winemakers are making more varieties of rosé. And what's your theory for why that is?
Well, sure, the sommelier community has been pushing for the last 20 or 30 years. People should drink more rosés. They're very fruit friendly. They're light, they're crisp, they're delicate. They go with almost anything. Maybe not a steak, but almost anything else. And we've been pushing this for years, and the tide has turned. People are now going crazy about rosé, but it's a double-edged sword. This is the first year every winery is now making rosé, and so it is more important than ever to talk to someone you trust about what rosé you buy, because there's a lot of bad rosé out there now. So come to a place like Vino Venue with our curated selection and find something good, because I've tasted some bad rosés the last couple of months, so it's more important than ever to buy from who you trust.
I alluded to this a bit ago, but again, one of the benefits of a place like Vino Venue is to avoid bad wine. I mean, just plainly stated, you guys have selected wines that are cut above, and so you can avoid bad rosé. I find that if you're someone who is not red wine, solely red wine focused or solely white wine focused, and there are those people,
there are,
and they just that's where your palate is, fine. But for those who have enjoyed whites and reds, but not rosés, it's a natural because there are some characteristics of both. I mean, literally and figuratively, it's rosé because, you know, it's maybe a little more fruit forward than some of the Chardonnays or the white wines, but not as robust as some of the reds. And there's got to be room, I would think, that in a wine food pairings on menus today, rosé has found its place.
Easy to pair. I mean, if you like summery foods and salads, you like spicy garlic shrimp. I mean, there's a million things you can pair with it. You want roast chicken, pork. It goes with almost anything. And there are different sweetness levels of rosé. So the spicier food, you want a rosé with a little bit of sweetness, maybe.
And for all you real men and real women who think that you should only be into robust reds, I challenge you, try a couple of the rosés. Get over to Vino Venue. And, you know, this is not an infomercial program. It's that guests have been selected to represent organizations that I, as a host, think embody best business practices or are really interesting with interesting guests. And today we have Rob representing an organization that embodies all of that. So I can say to you unabashedly, you should get over to Vino Venue and do something like try any one of those sessions that he mentioned, but also try something new and different. So in terms of speaking to people who only drink big, bold red wines, that's one of my favorite categories of wine. I love it. But I just like food too much to restrict myself to that. There's so much food that does not pair well with those. I need to broaden my horizons. So many seafoods that will work beautifully with a rosé. In fact, speaking of seafood, you do you annually work a low country boil into the
We haven't.
mix?
That's more of a summer. We do that around. We've been annually doing around 4th of July weekend, and then we'll do something in August too. It's light, it's fun, it's got some spice to it. We'll do some neat wines and beers with that, and people have fun. It's family friendly. We don't see a lot of kids in the Vino Venue normally. That's an occasion people bring their kids. It's fun. Who doesn't want to eat with their hands in the summertime?
Yeah, and it's right around the corner, actually. You had something I saw called wine and yoga. Tell us about that.
So a good friend of ours who works for a wine supplier is big into yoga, and so she's done some wine and yoga classes where you are doing some yoga moves and taking a break and treating yourself some delicious California Chardonnay Pinot Noir. It is fun. It's not serious. We're not usually we don't see a lot of people in leotards. That's a different event. People had fun with that.
Yeah, I personally see it as the perfect pairing. You know, if you've got an activity where you're learning to stretch and breathe and relax, what better thing to pair with it than a wine? And so I would say that food, or rather yoga and wine is a great pairing. Now, you have also, I saw on the calendar, your terroir showdowns. For listeners not familiar with terroir, I mean, that's a subcategory of the overall viticulture, and the viticulture is everything: the soil, the crops, the sense of place, the climate, and the sense of place. The character of the soil. But terroir would be more the earth and the soil. But also, tell us about your terroir showdowns, where you've got the Burgundy versus Bordeaux and the New World versus Old World. Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, it's easy to talk about different soil types and climates and aspects and how they, French oak barrels. It's easy to talk about that in an academic sense. We can show you the map, but until you actually put the wine in the mouth, you don't really know. But once you put your wine in the mouth, you understand how some climates are warmer, so therefore the wines are heavier, maybe perhaps more alcoholic. Some are lighter. How are they manipulating the wine? So until you actually try the wines, you don't know. So it's brought home to you by an expert wine instructor who will explain why these wines taste different and what you can make of them. And of course, it always goes back to food and wine pairing. What goes let's talk Pinot Noir, where a a duck breast with like a rich raspberry sauce might go better with a California Pinot Noir, or might overwhelm a Burgundy. So we'll do some food and wine pairings to illustrate how the same dish tastes different with two different wines. Because again, food and wine pairing always goes back to that.
And there's something I've always felt it was obligatory to mention to wine neophytes. And I include myself in that category in some sense. I've been around the block and I've tried a lot of different wines, but there's such a broad world of new wines to taste out there that I have certain neophyte qualities when it comes to some regions. But I always want to trust my taste buds, and I always say to other people to not overlook your taste buds. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter, your server or a highly educated sommelier might tell you that they think a particular wine is just a really delectable, perfect pairing with a given food item. But if it doesn't taste good to you, you want to trust your own taste buds. It sounds like you subscribe to that.
We subscribe to that. We with our wine dispensing system, we have 32 flavors of wine, and every day people say, "What do you recommend?" And I'll say, "Well, what are you looking for? Do you want me to find something for you that'll be a new and a revelation for you? Do you want something more familiar? What are your tastes in wine? What I like and what you might like be different. So tell me about the experience you want to do, and I'll design something for you." Everybody's different. Some people are a little more cautious. They don't want to dip that toe in the water. Other people want to jump right in.
Well, let's go back to who your customers are. Are you finding that you have a balance between wine neophytes who are just beginning to learn about wines and they're looking to Vino Venue to sort of help them navigate this vast sea of wines? Or do you have a lot of very seasoned, savvy customers who are coming there to expand on their solid foundation of wine knowledge, or is it a cross between the two and everything in between?
It's a cross. I mean, with our wine classes, we have wine classes at different levels, so they'll appeal to different people. And for our restaurant customers, some people are coming in just for a sandwich and a glass of wine, and they just happen to like our atmosphere. They might not want to learn about wine. They might want to just relax with their friends. Other people want to sit around and nerd out with me and talk about the different terroirs. So you can have different people at the same table. So it's really neat to be, whether you want to be totally nerd out or you just want to chill and have a glass of wine, we kind of got you covered. Whether it's education or just relaxing in the restaurant.
If you're a geek or a neophyte, you can learn something at Vino Venue. We're going to be taking a break, and when we come back, I'm going to have you tell us about the Bulldog Top 100. We're here with Rob Van Leer of Vino Venue. We'll be back for more right after this break.
This is Dr. Elena George. Join me Wednesday mornings from 9 to 10 a.m. for Medicine on Call, a show dedicated to exploring the medical, social, and political aspects of our healthcare system in order to find solutions. This is Dr. George from Peachtree ENT Center. We've won patient care awards and have the highest patient recommendations because we believe in practicing medicine the old-fashioned way. Practicing good medicine is based in listening to the patient and making a care plan that is individual. The best medical care is given when there is a strong doctor-patient relationship built on mutual trust and respect. At Peachtree ENT Center, we believe in taking care of the whole patient because healing is more than writing a prescription. Whether you have problems hearing, have frequent throat or sinus infections, from the time you call our office and speak to a real person, you'll be treated as an individual and not as an ailment. During your visit, you will not be rushed, and all your questions will be answered. When possible, natural treatments will be recommended to fix the problem. If surgery is recommended, cost-effective, minimally invasive treatment for snoring, sleep apnea, or sinus problems will be offered because Peachtree ENT Center is where patient care counts.
Whether cruising the Strip in a 57 Chevy or taking the family on a vacation in a 71 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser, you need to tune in to Classic Cars with Steve Ronaldo and Jim Weber every Saturday from 8 to 9 a.m. on americaswebradio.com.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the americasbroadcastnetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back to the Business Hour. We're here with Rob Van Leer of Vino Venue. He's a partner and the beverage director at Vino Venue, and we've been talking about the broad range of services and offerings, educational seminars and themed events. And I want to touch on the Bulldog Top 100. It's a unique distinction that we'll have you tell the listeners about.
Very proud moment for us. The Bulldog Top 100 is done by the Terry School of Business at University of Georgia, and it recognizes companies that are majority owned by University of Georgia graduates. And so they measure revenue growth year by year. And it's been going on for 8 years now. So Vino Venue was recognized in year 1, in year 2, and year 3, and every year the list of people who had made the list every year kept shrinking, as some people had good years, some had bad years. And until 2 years ago, we looked up, and lo and behold, we were the last man standing. Vino Venue was the only company recognized all 7 years for revenue growth. Very proud moment for our small business. So we got a table, and we were the troublemaking, rowdy ones, and people were looking at who are these guys, and suddenly announced we were the last man standing. A very proud moment for our small business. And there's some pretty healthy competition on that. So it's a great honor. And so now we've established a couple things in Michael Bryant's honor. There's an annual award, the Michael Bryant Award, awarded every year for sustained small business excellence. And we've established a Michael Bryant Scholarship for a student in need at University of Georgia who has entrepreneurial ambitions.
Yeah, the University of Georgia and the state of Georgia would, of course, have some very highly successful businesses. The climate in Georgia has been favorable for business, and homegrown MBAs from the Terry School would have started a number of successful companies. And although this program doesn't get into earnings and profitability, we're more into the character of a business, its products, its services, how it evolved. This program, this award is for revenue growth, and it says a lot that in a state that is highly competitive with alumni from a strong business program, it was quite something to be a repetitive year after year winner of that award. So, good job, Rob, and Lizette and
Michael,
Lilia
and Patrick and Lydia and a lot of other people.
That's right.
Yeah.
To the team, because it can't be done without a team. And you do have a strong team. In fact, I dare say, right down to the servers and people in the kitchen behind the scenes, you have a pretty passionate group, wouldn't you say?
Very passionate. It's fun. It's we work very hard, and sometimes it's easy to forget how cool a place it is. But the great news about Vino Venue is every single day people come and say, "Wow, what a great place!" I'm reminded every day of how amazing this place is and how much people enjoy it, how much they want to tell their friends about it. I mean, we have, but our staffers, the terms of passion, we want you to be there. We want you to have fun. We want you to, and please spend a little bit of money while you're there. But it's a neat place, and the people love working over there. We have a thriving volunteer program. Those of you who have a little free time and live in the Atlanta area, want to volunteer with us, please let us know. We'd love to talk to you about that.
Yeah, I don't think that the very best of food and beverage emporiums succeed without a critical mass of passion, and it would seem that Michael and Lilia have done a really good job of laying that foundation of the people that work there feeling good about what they do, and letting that passion carry over into dealing with customers, so that really you can go there and have a really good feeling beyond the food and the wine.
Exactly.
So when did you have a sense, when was your earliest point in time that you saw a wine as well, let's, even before it became professional, When did you cultivate a taste for wine?
Well, I had a taste for beer first when I was a younger gentleman, and so I drank a lot more beer. I became a beer geek first. I started getting more into wine in my 30s and 40s.
Like many of us.
Exactly. Ironically, I took a lot of wine trips. I didn't even know what I was doing. And so I remember being in a prestigious vineyard in Napa Valley with my wife and walking around the vineyard with a glass of the single vineyard wine in her hand and going, wow. Took a grape and said, this wine tastes exactly like this grape. You could tell it came from this vineyard. That was kind of an aha moment. But I was taking these trips. I was meeting Robert Mondavi, all these people. I didn't know what I was doing. But I said, this is really cool. Came back to Atlanta, met a master sommelier, Michael McDeal, who's been an influence to me. Michael Bryan, managing partner of Vina Venue, has been an influence to me. So the last 10, 12 years, really started doing more wine education, getting certifications, and getting passionate about it. So while I'm still kind of in the restaurant business, my focus more is wine. Wine is fun.
When did it happen? How long from when you were getting exposed to wine did you see it as something on the horizon that could remotely become professional?
Sure. It was a while. I was busy selling, working at a golf club and selling wedding receptions and selling OK wine, and it was probably 10 years. And I realized this is fun. I want to do more of this, and being exposed to more people makes a difference. The wine community is vibrant here in Atlanta, and so we all help each other. And so I've kind of continued that tradition where people have mentored me and influenced me, and I'm doing the same thing to other people right now. So this has been the last the 10 years of my life, really having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, you're a lucky man. You get to work in an industry, the retail end of an overall industry that has, for all those millennium that we talked about, been the source of good energy, good times, and having recently returned from Napa myself, you've got a lot of people out there that are very committed to quality grapes, quality grape growing techniques,
all around the world.
Yeah, I mentioned we had Kim McPherson on the program. We've had winemakers from Oregon. We had Hugh Davies of Schramsberg was a guest, and these are people that are passionate about what they do.
And Hugh makes some great sparkling wine.
Oh, they do, and they're one of the best domestically, and I'd even say globally.
Great wines.
And you take that passion that starts out in the field, and it carries over into a place like yours, and someone like you who would have traveled and experienced some of that, and that brings that passion to a retail setting. And Lizette, I would imagine, she's probably been around the block.
She has.
Spent some time in Napa Sonoma and Santa Barbara. What advice would you give to a listener out there that is looking to, let's say, travel? Where should they start? I have my own impression of what a good start would be to traveling to wine regions, but where would you say you might start if you were going to begin to...
So I'm going to speak to the Georgia listeners here. First of all, the state of Georgia is close. There's some nice wineries. They are 45 minutes to 2 hours away. It's easy. It's a day trip. That's where I would start. For the people in the United States, there's no question the West Coast of the United States has the most developed wine culture, so it's easy to Washington, Oregon, California to go there, and people are ready for it. They're professionals, and they know what they're doing. They speak English. Flights are easy. That's where I would start. So if you live in wherever you live in the country, I would start with your local people.
Yeah, North Georgia is actually got some nice wineries, and they have become more and more adept at handling visitors. The wines have constantly improved, so I guess this would be a great place that's within driving distance of Metro Atlanta. But if you're not in a wine growing state, the West Coast would be a great start. Everybody speaks English, as they do in most wineries in Italy and France. But maybe Italy or France would be a second.
They'd be second.
Region to go. You could become very knowledgeable and experience a broad range of wines and
culture.
And culture on the West Coast. Oregon, the Willamette Valley, and Washington also. There are thousands now, hundreds in California, hundreds in Washington, and I think, in hundreds in Oregon and a couple hundred in Washington. So collectively, I think now we have, thousands.
Thousands. It's awesome.
Any advice for a young professional thinking about a career in the food and beverage or wine-focused industry?
Sure, get to know people. Get to know people that have more experience than you. Buy them a glass of wine and listen to what they have to say. I mean, just look before you leap. Do it if you really love it. This is a hard job, and we work long hours, and some of it's very glamorous, some of it's not. So understand this is not for the lazy person.
Wise words. Look before you leap, and try to find something that you love. And if you're lucky enough, you'll be someone who gets to wake up every morning and feel good about what you do, and in your case, feel good throughout the day, I would imagine.
Exactly. It's a fun job.
Well, I want to say that I think highly of the Vino Venue operation, and I want to thank you for taking the time and sharing a lot about what's going on at Vino Venue.
It's a pleasure being here. This is fun. I hope people learn some stuff today.
You've been listening to the Business Hour here at America's Web Radio. We're on Fridays from 10 to 11 a.m. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you on the radio and internet next week.
Affordable health insurance was the promise of Obamacare, but for many, the government mandate caused more problems than it solved. This is Dr. Elena George from Medicine on Call, and I want to tell you about a truly affordable alternative allowed under Obamacare, Liberty HealthShare. Liberty HealthShare bypasses doctor and hospital panels, giving you the freedom to choose. And with a maximum of $500 out-of-pocket per person and 100% coverage up to $1 million per year per occurrence, you can rest assured knowing you and your family are protected. Coverage starts as low as $107 per month and also includes dental, vision, pharmacy, and holistic care. Liberty HealthShare puts you back in charge of your health. Visit them online at libertyoncall.org. Again, for a true affordable alternative to Obamacare, visit libertyoncall.org or call toll-free 1-800-714-6993 today.
The Docs for Patient Care Foundation is your way to join the fight and become a member of an organization created by doctors for patients dedicated to fighting for your healthcare freedom and preserving the doctor-patient relationship. Get a pen and paper. Write down www.docsforpatientcarefoundation.org. That's www.docsforpatientcarefoundation.org. Go to our site and please make a generous tax-deductible donation and join the fight today. Thank you.
Cook Immigration Partners is your passport through the immigration maze. Whether it's help with E-Verify in your business, or help in how to document a new employee under the new I-9 rules, or if you marry a foreign national, Cook Immigration Partners is your best choice for a legal advocate. Call us today at 866-286-6200. That's 866-286-6200, or visit us on the web at www.immigration.net.
45 years of experience is behind the most trusted name in auto transportation. Passport Transport, the first and finest today. That's why Passport Transport is the preferred auto transport for major auto manufacturers, concours, museums, tours, and collectors, and should be your choice from across the state to across the country. When you have the need, go to PassportTransport.com and enjoy the peace of mind referenced experience will give you. Passport Transport.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
And I guess I'll see you later this afternoon.
Atlanta Healing Center.
BroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Where we take the time to fix the problem.
Good morning. If it's Thursday, you're in the Doctor's Lounge. So those of you who are listening live, welcome back into the Doctor's Lounge. And if you are downloading this podcast, thank you for doing so. And we hope that you'll continue to go to the America's Web Radio or Docs for Patient Care site and continue to download our weekly shows. I'm your host this week, Dr. Hal Schurz, and we switch every week with my co-host, Dr. Mike Karuchik, who did a great interview last week with potential governor hopeful Hunter Hill. That was a terrific show that Dr. Mike did. And each week we bring you the best in healthcare news and try to equip you with the information that you need so that you can advocate for yourself and your family's healthcare needs. This show is brought to you by the Docs for Patient Care Foundation, which is the only physician-led healthcare think tank in the country, and we stand for the principles of healthcare freedom and the doctor-patient relationship, and we need your support so that we can continue to bring this show to you and do all the work that we're doing around the country. So please go to our website, D4PCFoundation.org. Yes, we're a foundation, D4PCFoundation.org, and you can give $5 or $500 or $5,000. No amount is too small or too big, but we really cannot continue to do what we do without the support of you, the listeners. So please give generously and allow us to help you fight for your healthcare freedom. So it's May already, and we are talking about the midterm elections of 2018, and the issues are if you're watching the news, they're kind of crazy. You know, the people who are talking about the midterm elections are referring to it as a referendum on Trump. They are looking at the opponents of Trump are looking at the midterms as a possible jumping off point to impeachment. They're talking about Nancy Pelosi again being the Speaker of the House. And what the vote will mean is that it will determine what will happen moving forward. And if the vote goes a certain way, then the progress that's being made, and yes, there is progress being made that people aren't hearing about in the legacy